Today, the 11th of May, is an important date for us. It is the death anniversary of Comrade R.B. More, who was a most unusual and most amazing, courageous comrade, member of the Communist Party of India when it was a united party, and later on he also joined the Communist Party of India, Marxist. But what made him exceptional was that he was himself, and his work was a link between the Dalit movement in the Konkan in Maharashtra, a link between Phule, Shahuji Maharaj, Dr. Ambedkar, and the left movement in Maharashtra. This is a very important point, and that's why the publication of this book by the Leftward Publications, Memoirs of a Dalit Communist, The Many Worlds of R.B. More, which comprises of a very important introduction and also a fragmented autobiography by Comrade More, which ends just before the first Mahaj Satyagraha, and then a very detailed biography of Comrade More by his son, also Comrade Saten More. So this book is extremely important at a time when the coming together of the Dalit movements and the left movement in our country has become perhaps one of the most important things that we have to all strive for. At a time when we see that Manuvadi forces are controlling the central government and many state governments and are pursuing their agenda of actually eviscerating the Constitution of India and supplanting it with the Manusmriti, when the worst kind of attacks on the livelihood issues, the rights of Dalits and even their right to life are taking place, and when an ideological battle is actually being waged against them. Because if we see what is being done in the name of the Bhima Koregaon case, it is actually an attempt to rob and cheat Dalits of their own history of courage and valor, which is a very despicable thing that the BJP government is doing. So at this juncture, it is extremely necessary for the left movement and the movement for Dalit emancipation, social reform to come together and fight as much in cooperation with each other as possible. And that is why we have seen during this period 2 or 3 events of great importance. One was what we call the institutional murder of Rohit Vemula. Rohit Vemula was not an ordinary Dalit student. He was a brilliant student who was highly political. And with all his criticisms of the left, he also dreamt of a blue sky with a red sun. And as he said, sometimes the sky would be bigger and the sun would be smaller, and sometimes the sun would be smaller and the sky would be larger. But this was what was necessary to take the fight for emancipation in our country forward. And also, this is the time which has seen something which is very symbolic, and that is the arrest of Anand Teltumde on the 14th of April, that is Baba Saheb Ambedkar's birth anniversary, which is celebrated all over the country. On that very day, a person who happens to be his grandson-in-law, Anand Teltumde, but who more importantly is a scholar who has tried to resolve the different ways in which class problems and caste problems have been studied, and the different ways in which caste struggle and class struggle has been taken forward in our country. He is a great scholar of trying to bring these two streams together. He feels this is absolutely essential, and he is critical of both those who stress only on the caste aspect and those who stress only on the class aspect. So he has also been arrested on Baba Saheb's Jayanti on very trumped up charges, and it is also part of the obsession of the BJP government with this completely falsified conspiracy theory around Bhima Koregaon. Actually, we all know that Bhima Koregaon commemorates a victory in which the Mahar soldiers played a very, very big part, And so it is part of Mahar pride. Dr. Ambedkar himself had gone to Bhima Koregaon and had spoken about the courage and valor of the Mahar community. This whole conspiracy that has been launched by the BJP government, as I said, is to deprive the Dalit community of their own history of valor and bravery. And so at this juncture, when the greatest attack since independence on Dalit rights is being waged, it is very important to actually learn from the life and writings of Comrade R.B. More. As I said, he was born in 1903 in the Konkan region of Maharashtra, and this place of his birth was extremely important because this was the area where many Mahars who had been in the British Army, after their retirement, they settled around this area of Dasgaon and Mahad in the Konkan area. And because of their having had some access to education, because of the fact that they were pensioners, received a pension because they had fought in the army, they had a certain status in that area, and they also, many of them also became part of the social reform movement. Some of them were associated with Mahatma Phule, others also met and were associated with Shahuji Maharaj, and in fact More's grandfather and Baba Saheb Ambedkar's father were also people who lived in the same area and who took up with others the question of Mahars again being given recruitment in the British Army, which had actually been stopped probably on the intervention of Brahminical forces. So it was in this atmosphere that Comrade More was born, and from a very early age, without even being conscious of the fact that he was engaged in a struggle for social reform, he actually, by his intelligence and his refusal to bow down, actually took the first steps towards a career as a militant and as a reformer, and then later on as a revolutionary. Even as a young boy, he had to face caste discrimination when he stood first in the entrance exam to the English school in Mahad. And when he went there, even though he had stood first and had been awarded a scholarship, he was not allowed to attend the school because the landlord of the school premises had said that if a Mahar boy entered the place, then the school would be closed. Against this, he was encouraged to write a postcard to a newspaper, and it was published. It created a great stir, and in fact the school authorities had to call him back and give him admission. So he started very early in life as someone who fought for his rights, and this continued for the rest of his life. After that, he had many ups and downs. He could never really complete his education because of discrimination, because of poverty and other reasons. But he also had a tremendous exposure both to the cultural life of various different communities in the area in which he grew up, and also to the life of the working class in Bombay, it was Bombay at that time, which he visited for the first time as a young boy or a young teenager. And he was living in working class areas where Mahars lived in large numbers, and he was able to experience the culture of the working class of different communities, and also experience the exploitation and the conditions of livelihood, the conditions of their work. And he himself started working at a very young age in the docks and in other places to earn a living. And he also went to Pune. He was able to work there. And it was soon after this that actually he met Baba Saheb for the first time, when members of his community in Bombay invited Baba Saheb to felicitate him on his educational achievements, etc. And More was able to see him from very close quarters, and in fact, he even had some conversation with Baba Saheb's brother, Balram Saheb, and a link of sorts was established between More and Baba Saheb, which was of course to become very strong much later. Now, after this, More also came back to his village and to his area, and he used to spend a lot of time in Mahad. In Mahad, there was a severe water problem because the main water supply the Dalits could not access. And so even when he was a schoolboy, he had actually started a tea shop in the main market where Mahars could gather, and which would also be able to provide them with drinking water. This soon became a hotel, and he used to spend most of his time in that hotel, and Mahars and people of other Dalit communities and other peasant communities from villages around used to come there. He used to write applications for them, he used to find out about their problems. And it was there that in 1923, he and some other people who used to frequent that hotel thought of having a convention of untouchables in the area, and they decided to invite Baba Sahab to be the chairman of that convention. This was in 1923, and More went back to Bombay and met Baba Sahab, convinced him to attend the convention. Baba Sahab was reluctant, but More was very persistent. And finally, in 1926, the first convention was held, and Baba Sahab was, 2 years later the convention was held, and Baba Sahab attended it. At that time, a very big change had taken place. There was a gentleman called Bhole, who was a member of the Legislative Assembly of Bombay, and he had got passed a resolution that nobody could prevent anyone because of his caste or her caste from accessing public spaces and public amenities. Now, of course, this was not really implemented, but the resolution was passed. And it was decided that in Mahad, there would be a satyagraha for the untouchable community and all the subcastes of this community to access the water of the Chawad lake. And Dr. Baba Sahab was to lead this satyagraha. This was the famous Mahad satyagraha, which took place first in 26 and then again in 27. And More was one of the main organizers. He traveled in the area, he met the different caste panchayats, and he was able to mobilize people for this first public action of Baba Saheb Ambedkar against untouchability, which is of course which has been a great change maker in the social and political history of our country. When they all collected near the tank and they started to take the water, they were attacked by the upper castes, they were beaten up, and they had to leave the place. And then the upper castes purified the tank, and Baba Sahab decided that tactically it was better to withdraw for the time, because they had actually accomplished what they had come there to do. They had drunk the water of the tank. And the next year, it was decided that they would undertake the satyagraha again with more preparation. And actually, More founded that group of militant young Dalits, which was the sort of, they were the volunteers who were going to protect Dalit rights, and they gave a great welcome to Baba Saheb when he came. And once again, they assembled to approach the tank. But this time, a much more important incident occurred, and that was when the upper caste once again opposed them. The Manusmriti was burnt by Baba Saheb Ambedkar, and all the Dalits were gathered there. The Manusmriti as a symbol of Dalit oppression, and also a symbol of how religious texts were completely replete with the worst kind of discrimination, the worst kind of hatred, the worst kind of inequality, justification of inequality. That Manusmriti, which Dr. Ambedkar referred to again and again in his writings as something that was hateful and should be destroyed, that was burnt for the first time publicly in 1927 at Mahad with Comrade More at Dr. Ambedkar's side. Now, after this, More, while he continued to be a great follower of Dr. Ambedkar, he started also, while he was living in Bombay, getting exposed to the organized working class movements there. He was very much involved in the struggles of the textile workers. He used to sit with them, discuss with them, talk about the union activities. He started meeting many people who were part of the communist movement. He met all the great names, Shamrao, Parulekar, B.T., Randive, Comrade, Jambekar, all these people, and he was able to discuss their ideas also with them. And as his son has written, in 1930, he actually read the Communist Manifesto, and he felt that this actually was the path for the liberation of society and also for the liberation of the Dalit community. He came to believe that without this sort of a socialist revolution occurring in our country, untouchability also could not be destroyed. And from then onwards, it became his life work to bring both these struggles together. The struggle against class oppression and the struggle against caste oppression. Because as he said, who are the Dalits? The Dalits are the poorest of the poor, the most exploited of the exploited, and they form the largest section of the working class. It's very interesting that at this point, he went to Baba Sahib and said that he was going to join the Communist Party. And Baba Sahib was not angry, though he had his own differences with the communists, which he had expressed very freely. And he was not at all angry with More. In fact, he just told More, well, I hope you will be treated with respect, and I hope that you will get the respect that you deserve over there. And after that, Comrade More became a very, very ardent activist of the Communist Party, but he never severed his links with Dr. Ambedkar or with the Dalit movement. He was a part of all the strikes and all the working class struggles that took place. He endured great privation, terrible poverty. Very often he was thrown out of whichever miserable room in which he was staying with his family, and he had to spend days and nights on the pavement. There are instances when he was in jail and his wife and small children were actually under the railway overbridge of Delisle Road. They were spotted there by other comrades who helped them. So he led a life of great privation and great poverty, but that never deterred him from his complete and total involvement in the struggle. And what was also very important is he also remained very, very involved with the cultural movement. He was always taking part or promoting working class culture, working class singing groups, theatre groups. He was very close to the great legendary Amar Sheikh. And so his life as a communist had many, many aspects to it. And that is why it is worth emulating and worth studying, because he was unusual in the fact that he tried to first of all bring the class and caste struggles together. He tried to be a link between the Ambedkarite struggle and the communist struggle, and also he understood the importance of the cultural movement, the cultural part of working class life, how important that was also, not only to be reinterpreted and used to give new messages to the working class, but also to make others understand the richness of working class life. And this was what kept him, these were the motivating forces of his life throughout his life. And in fact, when Dr. Ambedkar died, it was Comrade More who organized one of the big condolence meetings to which leading communists also came and spoke alongside Ambedkarites, sharing the same dais. And much later, when Comrade More himself died, his condolence meeting also was addressed by all the major Ambedkarite leaders and the leaders of the Communist Party and the CPIM of the time. This was the way in which his life and his death always were occasions to try and bring these two very important aspects of our struggle for emancipation in this country together. Now, people ask that actually what was the Communist Party's attitude to what Comrade More was trying to do? It was not uniform. On the one hand, we have Comrade B.T. Randevi, who very early talked about and wrote about the links between the class and caste movements. He in fact supported Comrade Dr. Ambedkar when he was fighting for special electorate for the Dalits. He supported that movement, and he wrote a very strong article about it, and Gandhi's fast also. But there were differences of approach, and as Comrade More himself, in a letter that he wrote to the leadership of the party, says, wherever the party took up the question of social reform, the fight against untouchability, actually the party became very strong in those areas. And he mentions Tripura, where the party was in the lead for Adivasi rights. He talked about the struggles in Maharashtra, led by Godavari Parulekar and Comrade Shamrao Parulekar for the Adivasis in those areas of Thane and other parts of Maharashtra. And he also talked about Kerala, where the communist movement became the inheritor of the social reform movement in that state, and has remained so, which is one of the sources of its great strength. So, in his writings, in his appeals to the party, and in his own life, this is what Comrade More was consistently trying to bring about, was the fusion, or at least the cooperation between these two very important streams of the movement for emancipation in our country. And I think that what he's been telling us, what he wrote, is having its own effect. For example, in Tamil Nadu today, it is the CPIM and the comrades who are working in this very broad-based movement called the front called the Tamil Nadu Untouchability Eradication Front, which has now come to be acknowledged by all Dalit groups in Tamil Nadu as being in the forefront of the fight, the struggle for Dalit rights. Similarly, in Kerala also, that struggle is continuing with a lot of communist involvement. Andhra Pradesh is another example. In different ways, communists have been part and an important part in the fight against untouchability and for Dalit rights. And now, with the formation of the Dalit Shoshan Mukti Manch, the party, by creating this platform on which many Dalit comrades and non-Dalit comrades are actively participating, has opened the way for greater movements and activities with Dalit groups, because there is absolutely an open forum. This is an open forum for any and all groups that are fighting for Dalit rights to come together and participate in a common struggle. This is a new beginning. It is not without hiccups. The way forward is not without its hiccups. But this is certainly part of a realization that the battle against untouchability, the battle for social reform, the battle for Dalit rights, women's rights, minority rights, all these battles have to be part and parcel of the working class struggle. One cannot exist without the other. One cannot be strong without the other. And so at this juncture, when on the one hand we are seeing, with the coming of the BJP to power at the center and many of the states, that every day there is an attack on Dalit rights. We've seen the Supreme Court actually eviscerating the Prevention of Atrocities Act. And what a struggle against that. What a battle against that. And finally, the Parliament had to pass legislation to restore the act to its original form. Then we have seen recently one attack after another in the courts against the principle of reservation itself, against the concept of reservation itself. So this is just one small aspect of the attack on Dalit rights. What we are also seeing is that in the sphere of education, more and more measures are being adopted by the central government, which will see to it that Dalit children are actually denied access to education and access to higher education. Scholarships are not being paid, admissions are not being given, so many hurdles are being placed on their path to education. Also, reservation in jobs. Every day, first of all, with the folding up, with privatization now being the slogan of almost all governments, and with no expansion in the government sector, there is less and less opportunity for Dalits to get government jobs. What is happening is that even the opportunities that are open to them by all kinds of devious means, those opportunities are also being closed to them. And today, with contractualization and with the complete lack of permanent jobs, we find that Dalits are being more and more pushed into contract work and completely insecure work, which is going to definitely get worse and worse in the days to come. So in the face of these huge attacks, and these attacks are taking place every day, the great necessity of the left movement and the movement for social reform, Dalit rights, anti-untouchability coming together is more important than ever before. The need is important, and Comrade More's book being published at this time tells us how we can actually bring this about. His life, his work, his writings, his letters to the Communist Party, and everything that he did was actually a living example of how this is to be done. And reading this book, understanding what he's trying to say, is going to help us all to go a long way towards achieving what was not just his goal, but what has to be the goal of the emancipatory movement in our country.